right, Happy New Year, or sorry, Merry New Year, as we say. Happy polar vortex, or I guess I survived the polar vortex at this point. I spent the last couple days in a cabin in the woods, and that was not the right time to do that. But thank you all for coming out here in the snow and cold. Thank you, Central, for hosting us. This is the first CONDG, or CentralOhio.net Developer Group of the year, and I will be speaking tonight. I'm Matt Eland. If you haven't met me, please chat later and talk nerdy things. But we're talking today about side quests or side projects. While you are here, please device responsibly. I don't think that most of you are going to be on Central's Wi-Fi, so we can probably remove this slide in the future, but that would impact our streaming capabilities. And Windows phones are awesome. I don't care what you say, Sean. We are on Meetup. If you found us socially, you can follow us on Meetup, join the group, and you'll get notifications of our next events. But we always meet the fourth Thursday of the month. Not the last Thursday of the month, which is what I often think it is, but the fourth Thursday of the month, which is relevant some of those summer months. And we do not meet in November or December, so this is our first meeting since, October? So pretty nice to be back here. Organizers are myself, Alan Barber over there running the stream, thanks Alan, and Sam Gomez, who is currently babysitting while his wife is out on a cruise and celebrating her birthday and all that good stuff. So we miss you, Sam. We hope you are enjoying things. Don't get tied up too much. 2025, we are still building out our schedule for 2025. We have me talking tonight on side projects. Next month, we have Cameron Presley coming back to talk about functional programming and rebuilding Link. So if you want to figure out how Link works internally, it's going to kind of give you a good sense of how that works. But he's also going to be showing you and teaching you functional programming as a different style of programming, which is pretty cool. Some of the side projects I'm talking about tonight have been using functional programming, so that's really cool. You'll notice we have a lot of to be determined slots, and then lightning talks as always in July. We are looking at a couple other talks. We just don't have them fully scheduled yet. We're going to have a talk on security, we're pretty sure, authentication. Alan, you got one that you're developing, or a couple that you're developing. I have a couple others that I'm developing if we need a sub. And then you were talking to someone on, what topic was that?
I believe recruiting, job hiring. We're going to try to get
Yeah, so a panel on recruiting and hiring and the like, and I have someone to recommend for that too. Cool. So if you want to speak, if you know someone who's got some cool stuff that you'd like to learn from, if you've seen some talks in the community, we would love to have you just chat with us afterwards, and we'll get you put on the schedule. You always got some good stuff, so we'd love to have it here. But we are pretty confident about at least the first quarter, but we'd love to get you slotted so you have time to prepare and all that good stuff. So we are on YouTube, which we are streaming to right now. Thanks, Alan, for maintaining that and setting up the streaming gear and cameras and dealing with all the hassles that you deal with for that kind of thing. If you want to see our past meetings, if you want to share them with a friend later on, you can put them on there. Since it's me speaking, I'm always happy to give stuff just kind of virtually or in person. If you want to do a lunch and learn with your organization, whether it's this talk or something else, just chat with me. I'm happy to arrange that and talk details on that. We are sometimes on Twitter /X. It's really just Twitter. I can't tell you the last time we tweeted, or sorry, Z-did something. Don't have a great appetite for that there, but you can follow us on there. We are also on LinkedIn, and so we do post on that. Have we squatted ourselves on other platforms yet? We probably ought to do that. We'll get on that.
Instagram, I think.
Instagram, I forgot that was a thing. I don't have much time for social anymore. We want to thank our sponsors, particularly Central. This is such a great place to meet, and I love the area, I love the parking, and your office is just lovely. So thank you so much for hosting us. We're really happy to be here. We also thank the .NET Foundation for paying our meetup fees. There are a shocking number of fees associated with meetup, and they take care of that for us so we don't have to. And then JetBrains has been our raffle sponsor for a very long time, and we're very thankful for them. However, there's less of a need for that now because Writer is now free, as is WebStorm, if you're doing non-commercial use. So if you're not using this for your work or building something commercial, go download it and have fun with it. And it's a great cross-platform set of IDEs. I do most of my development nowadays on Rider because I'm usually on Linux when I'm not doing things for my client. Events in town, the call for speakers for Stir Trek remains open. It will end in a number of days. Tiana, do you happen to know the end of our CFP?
I do. I know it very well. CFP ends on Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. Ohio time. Definitely get your talks. You can submit more than one. Submit multiple abstracts.
I think we limit you to about 5 typically. Submit submit your talks. Tuesday's sneaking up on you. I would get them in by the end of the weekend, and then edit them and the like. And it's really a great event. If you're not familiar with Star Trek, it's here in town at Easton. You get to watch a movie afterwards. The comfy seats. If you're a boring speaker, somebody may start snoring in your talk, so don't be a boring speaker. It happens. But don't do that. So keep that in mind. The event will be on the first Friday of May. I forget what date that is. May 2nd. Tiana, you're great. It's always a lot of fun. And I think it's Thunderbolts this year is the movie that we expect, but that may change. So who here is hiring? Improving is hiring. Alan, you want to speak about what you're looking for?
Allthings.net.
Allthings.net?
Yeah, we're always looking.
So if you know some to allthings.net, talk to Alan or someone over at Improving. They are a great employer and a great member of the community, and we really like them. House rules, please be quiet and respectful. Ask questions, please interrupt your speaker. Your speaker is me. I was paid to be interrupted for a very long time, especially by that lady back there in the green. Do the things that Central likes you to do. Marcel and Paris back there can help you if you get lost. The bathrooms, I think, are over that way. Take a left just prior to Excellence, and you should find them, I believe. And I guess with that, it's me. So I'll put on my speaker hat. I am Matt Eland. If you don't know me, I am a wizard and AI specialist at Leading Edge. So I'm literally a professional wizard, which I still don't know how they gave me that title, because you don't give me that title, because you know the things I will do with it. And I get to do a lot of really fun stuff for Leading Edge and for its clients with .NET, with AI, and all sorts of other things. And that's a lot of fun. This talk tonight is really about the side projects that we can get up to and why you might want to do that, how you go about doing that, ideas for side projects, some cautions with side projects, etc. I do like the term side quest, especially because I've been doing a lot more Dungeons and Dragons recently, and so with role-playing games, you got a lot of side quests going on. So what are side projects? I define them as a elective, non-critical, self-selected project intended for a combination of learning, personal usefulness or utility, enjoyment, and things that are usually focused on something that's important to you, whether that's a topic of interest or a specific technology. If you want to drill into the term project, that's something with a fixed scope and timeline. Right? That timeline and scope may increase or decrease, change, but it's something that goes on for a period of time and then ends. Okay? So just to orient you on side projects, if you've not done these or not done these recently, I'll just give you a tour of some of my more recent or more memorable side projects before we talk specifically. The one that's really been making me very happy recently has been building a digital dungeon master to replace my coworker who only runs our sessions once a month. Once a month is not enough, is not frequently enough for Matt's appetite for Dungeons and Dragons, so I built an AI dungeon master that has a prompt, that has a series of databases and vector stores and things like that have all sorts of Dungeons and Dragons rules or Traveler rules, the abilities to generate worlds and remember past sessions, so that I can say, hey, I want to do this solo D&D campaign. Okay, I want to try to do this. What happens next? And it turns out it's really good at that, with some caveats, right? Like there is a limitation in that because this is built on top of a large language model, those things were sort of calibrated to be very helpful. So if I was trying to run Lord of the Rings, the role-playing game, I might say, okay, I take the ring and I'm going to travel to Mount Doom. And it will say, okay, after several days of travel, you arrive at the slopes of Mount Doom. What do you want to do next? It's like, okay, well, let's make it a little bit more tricky. But that's the project that I've been working on as I can, and it's been a lot of fun and nerdery, and I expect to have a talk on that in the future. I have been working on a probabilistic model of the game One Night Ultimate Werewolf by Bezier Games. The spelling here is intentional. Of where is the wolf? You're trying to find out which player has the wolf cards. But my goal here is to try to train a machine that can lie to me convincingly and detect when I'm lying to it convincingly. So I've been working on and off on this project, and I'll be wrapping work on that within the next few months because I have to get this into a book that this is getting put into in early 2026. So that's exciting for me, but I'm looking forward to having this working and done because it's had a number of frustrating points over the years. Last week, a week from tomorrow, I was at CONDG presenting on mad data science. So they let me dress as a mad scientist, hang around a bunch of kids and their parents, and talk about AI, machine learning, and killer squirrels. And it was a lot of fun, except when the rubber boot I was wearing, it didn't want to come off, and we had to pull, and about flew out the window. It was great, but it was a good introduction to machine learning and AI for the kids. But this is really to illustrate that side projects don't have to be purely programming, right? This is a side project that happened to be a talk. It was a talk built around an application, but it was a side project that was effectively a talk and an app built for that. As part of this app, I got to revisit one of my favorite side projects, which is a reinforcement learning project where I trained a squirrel to learn how to find a acorn, get to a tree, and then avoid the dog or gorilla I think I substituted for at CodeMash. This was supposed to be animated, but Linux is not liking my GIFs today, or GIFs, depending on your religion. As part of this, I also showed off my automating my dog thing. So this is really a teaching thing I built for Azure AI services. It used to be called Azure Cognitive Services, but I just wanted to show people that you can build something that has a camera that can investigate the world and can remark on it, can respond conversationally and the like. And I built this all around this AI agent that's pretending to be a dog. Absolutely ridiculous idea, but it was very helpful for teaching. And I showed that to the kids, though I didn't plug in the webcam because I didn't want to be sending images of minors to Azure. That just didn't sit well with me. I trust Microsoft, but I'm always going to do what's best for the kids. I do feel bad for the cleaning staff at the Kalahari. I was not thinking through my arrangement, and my closet actually scared me a number of times last week because I thought there was a person hiding in it. It wound up being just my lab coat and boots, and then I use a modified gun case to actually carry around all my equipment there. So some of these projects might get you on lists. I've never gone through air travel with this thing. I never will. But just keep that in mind, right? This is a project that I did that was not programming related. This is Python. I believe I did this in I did pandas and Plotly. We were talking about Python earlier. But I was using data analysis, data analytics to say, hey, what does it take to make a Doctor Who episode good or bad? And it's been so bad in recent years, what would it take to make Doctor Who actually okay again? And my analysis actually came up with the recommendation of bringing back Stephen Moffat and David Tennant. And I presented those findings in 2021, 2022, something like that. And then 6 months later, Disney says, hey, we're bringing back Moffat, we're bringing back Tennant. And I was like, cool. And it was pretty good again. That was great. I am perhaps more known for my work with Die Hard. That's a lot of what got me my first Microsoft MVP award was proving definitively that Die Hard is a Christmas movie using machine learning. When I started at Leading Edge, one of the guys internally, I'm now mentoring him actually, but he says, you're the guy that did the Die Hard thing. I'm like, it could be a random person. That's cool. But yeah, you can feed it a bunch of information and get a response out of that. So a bunch of different things that represent different things you can do with projects. Some of them might be programming, some of them might be talk related, some of them might be analytics or machine learning. It's what's interesting to you and what's interesting to you as you're going about a side project. I do like to write, and writing has become a side project. I have a copy of my most recent book here that Sam Gomez and I did together. Actually, Sam was my technical editor for a lot of this stuff. So I'll be giving that away later on, as well as JetBrains licenses for those interested in that. And then creating technical content, whether on YouTube or Udemy or Dome Train, or I did some on LinkedIn Learning. Those are also forms of side projects that might be a little bit different. So now that we kind of covered what side projects are, I'm curious, who here has done a side project in the last, let's say, 6 months? Awesome. About 6 hands or so. That's pretty good. So do you have to do side projects? No. Will people hunt you down if you don't do side projects? I really hope not, because they shouldn't. You shouldn't have to do side projects, and you shouldn't have to do side projects to be considered a good developer or good employee or whatever it might be. But side projects are really fun and fulfilling if you have the luxury of being able to afford the time and energy to devote to them. Why would you do a side project? Well, a lot of different reasons. We'll drill into some of these. I think programming is a lot of fun. I've always thought that programming is a lot of fun. And it's especially fun if you can choose what you get to code and what you get to learn. And you can use your programming to learn and grow and build cool things. As you get deeper into your career, your side projects can start to hold multiple uses. So you can use it as a proof of concept. If you're trying to convince people at work to try a new library or try new technology, it can be a really persuasive tool there. But you can also make money off of side projects, though it does really take the stars aligning just right for that to happen. We'll talk more about these things in more detail in a bit. We talked a little bit about the different types of side projects. But side projects don't have to be just small, they don't have to be big. They can be really whatever you want them to be. I like the idea of side projects being useful to you, especially your first few side projects. So your first few side projects might be things that would work with a file on your file system and do something that's like something automated or common to you. I've had a number of students that have done things like Magic the Gathering card trackers or dice rollers or things like that, right? Like little, small, very scoped things that they can use and get benefit from and then move on to something else. I think that's really fun. But there's also the stuff that you don't get to play with in your day job that you can play with in a side project, and that equips you to be better able to use it in your day job as the time moves on. So if you're looking for a side project, I dealt with a surprising number of students who were trying to get started. And they're like, Matt, I want to do a side project. I just graduated. I want to stay active in programming. What do I build? And it's sort of a, what do you care about, right? What's interesting to you? What do you want to learn? I like to do things that are sparking my interest or have sparked my interest recently. So, what are your hobbies? What are you watching on TV? I've watched enough Battlestar Galactica and The Expanse that I've built some like sci-fi trackers where I'm playing with SVGs to just chart out radar and junk like that, right? It's all about what you care about. And if you're feeling particularly noble, that could be what's interesting or helpful to the people in your life, right? I've seen people build side projects to help their spouse or their family member with special needs or their kids or whatever it might be, right? Your side projects are there to help you and stay interesting to you. I have a dear coworker of mine, or former coworker of mine, who we taught together, and he would often say that your side project should be something you care passionately about, because at some point they're going to frustrate you and you're going to want to give up on them, which is okay. Actually, we'll talk more about that. But you're going to be less likely to give up on them if you care about what you're building and it's personally interesting to you. Technology ideas. There's so much stuff in .NET to play with, right? So pick something that you've seen recently, or maybe learned at a conference, or heard mentioned from a coworker, or saw an article on. Just say, hey, that's really kind of cool looking. I'd like to play with that a little bit more, right? There's always more things to learn than you have time for, even if you spend all your time learning. That's just sort of the curse of the technologist. You'll never learn everything, and by the time you do learn everything, even if you could, they'll have reinvented everything else while you're busy with that, and there'll be more things for you to learn, right? That's just the nature of things. Notably, this slide is just only kind of fairly recent things with .NET, and doesn't even involve anything AI related, which is unusual for me. So there's just a sea of things. Pick a few that are interesting to you, and just go and try to apply them, right? Really fun stuff. Interesting topics. I couldn't get the animation working here on this Linux box, but this is a simulation I built in June of 2020 of a starship. So these little red and blue and white dots are representing the concentration of oxygen and carbon dioxide and things like that in a fictional starship. And what I was doing is like, hey, as the little nerd was walking around, well, he's converting the oxygen into CO2. And the plants and the air scrubbers and the vents, the doors and stuff like that were sucking the gases around. You can see like the density of it. And so this was an interesting little sandbox I was playing with. But I implemented all this in F# because I really wanted to play with functional programming and see what would that look like for something this small. A ridiculous thing, completely not useful at all, except for maybe as a teaching tool. It was interesting to me for a month or so. So the really cool thing about this is you are not constrained to working with, let's say, .NET Framework. If you're stuck with that at work, you can work with whatever the latest and greatest is. You can start a new .NET Aspire or Blazor WASM project or whatever is interesting to you. Play with .NET MAUI. Experiment with Avalonia UI or Uno for cross-platform app development. Heck, go off and learn Python, right? Build something very frequently. One of the things I often did when I was emerging in my education was every time I learned a new language, I built an interactive fiction, like a Zork-like game, using that language just to understand it a little bit more. So it was kind of my hello world. Again, I might be a nerd. It's okay, right? That's sort of what was fun to me. It's really fun to build something that's fun to play with. This is a very dim screenshot of Unity 3D, back before Unity 3D sort of imploded on itself. I spent, I think, Easter weekend and some extra days around my nephew, who was, I think, maybe 8 at the time. And he says, Uncle Matt, can we make a game? I'm like, sure, Parker. Yeah, let's go out and make a game. And so I made a flat plane. I imported some models, and I made some basic 3D scripts around it to like let the player aim the little robot and fire a rocket or whatever. And the two of us would have a split screen deathmatch, right? Like it was a lot of fun. I mean, deathmatch with an 8-year-old, so maybe not the most compelling experience, but it was a great bonding experience, and we could do it pretty quickly with the skills that I built up, and that was fun. A lot of the game projects in particular, I found it's like, oh, I should probably get back to coding and stop playing my game, and that's when you know you're doing something fun, right? That and the D&D thing. It's also fun to celebrate your achievements. I have something where, as I'm going, I will buy a bobblehead, a Funko Pop bobblehead, to represent the project I'm taking on, if it's a significant enough project. And so I have actually a couple of John McClanes at this point, and I have a shelf at home of my completed ones. I have another shelf with the books, and I think some of my other ones are over there. But it's kind of a nice little accomplishment thing to say, hey, this shelf is growing over time as I start building nerdier things. So that's really fun, and you can just say, hey, here's this, and someone can ask you, what does this represent, and you can tell them. So for example, the Batman, it's not because I'm Batman, as some people allege. It's because I built a Bat computer with semantic kernel and the like to help people understand how that technology worked. It's also really cool to make a difference. I like writing. Mark, I think back there, you like writing as well?
Sometimes.
writing can be frustrating, but it's really cool to go somewhere and find someone who's read your book and benefited from it, or read your blog post and benefited from it. I probably about 5 or 6 times, I'd say 5 or 6 times in my career at least, someone has linked me to my own blog post without realizing that it was my own blog post, and that's always a fun thing. It was particularly fun the one time the person was saying, "No, you're wrong because this guy says this." I'm like, that was me. But it's really fulfilling to see the work that you do benefit other people, whether it's a library or something you wrote or something you shared. Right? You get to pick whatever is of interest to you. This was me learning Python. I'm like, well, I want to build something with a Raspberry Pi. I want to build a multifunction display. All right, well, heck, why not? Let's get a screen going. Let's get a Raspberry Pi. What can I mount a screen on? I'm horrible at hardware. I don't know. I guess an ammo can will fit it. So I bought an ammo can and I sawed through the dang thing to try to mount a thing. I'm not good with hardware, right? But I had this device that looked a little bit too much like a bomb. But it was how I learned Python, and I threw it away a year or two ago because it's like, I'm never turning this thing on. This thing is a huge fire hazard. But it was fun to play with, and there was really no reason for it to exist other than I found it was interesting. But it would give me basically readouts of OpenStreetMap data nearby and the state of my computer processor and things like that. Side projects can be really good for your career over time or just in a moment, right? Being able to say, to just link someone to your GitHub profile, or they search you and find your GitHub profile and they can see the side projects that you've starred and your activity in various areas and the way you present yourself, right? So I have a bunch of things that I have said, hey, these are some things that maybe represent me at the moment in a description and the like, and you can actually put some little HTML in there too, which is kind of sneaky. So I was able to do some like side float right kind of stuff on that, which is cool. But it's a good way of presenting yourself to the technical community in an interview. So if I'm ever interviewing with Sean for a job, like he knows, okay, this guy does do some coding on the side. I can see some of the things he's interested in, some of the technologies he's worked with, and he can silently judge me for not putting enough code comments or documentation or unit tests in my side projects. Side projects, I think, can be really helpful, not just for your ability to attract a new job or start a conversation in an interview, but they can really help give you that confidence that you need to succeed in the current role. Because I found a number of times in my career I've been interested in something, and that thing I've been interested in becomes relevant to my job 3 to 9 months later. And now it's like, oh, we want to do this? Okay, well, here's some caveats with it. Here's what I found works well. And all of a sudden you're running a project on it, or you're on a project on it. And you get to work on the things that you want to work on because you have experience with them, because you had experience with them doing something incredibly nerdy with them in your basement, right? Whatever it might be. So side projects can really give you a lot of success in the things you're already doing, but they can also open up new opportunities. Leading Edge, we have a specialization program where people can apply to become specialists. I am an AI specialist for us for the last 2 years, and as part of that process, I have to say, hey, here's how good I am at these various little things, and I have to basically justify my skill set in that. And for each one of those things, I could say, hey, here's some side projects I've done that involve this, or here's some papers I wrote, or some talks I gave on this. And they're like, okay, Matt, this is a no-brainer. Boom, approved, you're a specialist, yay. And that looks really good on a resume, and it looks good-ish to clients and things like that. And it is really good for career advancement and future opportunities as well. So your side projects can help drive your momentum forward to a certain point. If you move off into management, your side projects are probably a little bit less relevant because your developer skills don't matter as much as your people skills. And your people skills matter more than you think they do, even as a developer. So that's a whole different talk that maybe we should get in this year. So I also think that side projects are really great for examples. James and I chat over there a lot, and James can be interested about random things. And if James happens to be interested about, say, semantic kernel or AI, I can say, oh, hey, check this out. I have this repository out there. This bat computer thing I built using Spectre Console, which Mike Eaton presented on last year before, it was kind of around the border of it. I actually presented this at Code Mash last year as a workshop. And so I built all this code as an example for people to use. And it's funny, I'd already built out the slide deck, but today somebody reached out to me and said, hey, Matt, I want to learn about this. And I'm like, here you go, here's a link to it. And that was really handy, because that way I didn't have to talk to the person. I could just give someone a link slap and go off and drink my Diet Dr. Pepper. But it's really handy to have an example in your back pocket ready to share with people, right? Or a project to modify slightly and say, hey, what if I did this? Would this get any better? Your side projects can pretty quickly become talks if they're interesting enough or on interesting technologies. My Die Hard side project that was just really an experiment to see, could I win a fight with my wife? It's a whole different story. It's not quite that bad. But it did come out of a disagreement my wife and I had on Die Hard. It was one of the few times that she was wrong in her life. But that talk actually wound up coming from that project. I was able to say, hey, here's how you get started with machine learning, and here's a really weird example of machine learning. And I was able to present down there in actually a number of places, but this picture is from Momentum Conference in Cincinnati, which I now help organize at this point. But that's maybe one of my favorite talks I've ever given in my life, was because of this nerdery involving Die Hard. It was a lot of fun. So you might be mortified of getting in front of other people. That's okay. That's normal. It kind of takes a certain sociopath to get in front of other people. That's okay. But at some point, you can share things with other people and just share that knowledge you've been getting from your side project with your coworkers or your friends or whatever it might be, whether formally or informally. Gosh, I forgot about the slide. One of the nice perks about side projects is they don't matter, right? Your side project doesn't matter. If I fail in my side project, my prototype doesn't work, it really doesn't matter. This was an AI system that we were prototyping at Leading Edge last year to basically build a system to insult our coworkers. We did not want to deploy this ever because the actual existence of this was fairly evil. But this was a fun learning project that we all did last June. And we experimented with a number of computer vision and LLM technologies. And one of the things we found in this project was that Azure actually blurs out your face. And so sometimes when people would interact with the system, it would remark on you being a man of mystery and having a blurry face. And this was something we had no idea even existed. But because we decided to do really dorky things with this thing, we found this limitation. And so if a client comes to us and says, hey, we want to do facial recognition using this technology, we would be able to say, no, you don't want to do that. Here's what we should do instead. Or, okay, we can go down this, but here's what our limitations are going to be. And so, A, that's wisdom that we didn't have before, knowledge we didn't have before. B, the client doesn't have to pay for that, right? They are benefiting from our experience and avoiding the pitfalls that we discovered by exploring for fun. And C, if the project never worked, it was non-viable, who cares? We would present to our organization. We might look a little silly in this hackathon, but people would have a good laugh and we'd learn from it. Versus if I'm taking a brand new technology and I'm trying to incorporate it into a production web application, I can test and test and test and test. But until I'm using it the way a real user uses it, I might not find critical bugs or bugs at scale, right? So you are eliminating risk or reducing risk through exploration on things that don't really matter, which is really neat. So profit. I don't think profit is a good reason for a side project. I think we're getting more into side hustle territory when we're getting into that. But I don't love that idea. I'm still altruistic and coding is fun and all this stuff is for the benefit of the community. However, the web servers do cost money. I was teaching in 2020, 2021 when the economy started to go really bad from a hiring perspective. And one of the things that I noticed was that my students or my grads who were doing side projects had better placement rates than the ones who weren't. So I was thinking, what can I do for my students to try to help them stay engaged after they graduate, help them with side projects, because I thought it would help them succeed more. And so I put together a web application called Side Dev at the time, and I was building out all this stuff, and it was actually a pretty good prototype. But what I really wanted it to do was be able to say, hey, you're using these technologies, you should also consider these technologies. Kind of a recommender-based approach. This was, I think, 2021 when I was doing this. And what I discovered at the time was I was not very good with data analysis and machine learning, and I was not very good with data mining. This was actually a trigger for me in going out and getting that master's degree a little bit later, because I found there were limits to what I could do on my own and limits to what I could explore on my own. This is as close as I've come to launching something that would be like a production SaaS product that could conceivably run ads or something like that. There are people out there who take their side projects, polish them, release them, and start selling ad revenue, start selling maybe even production licenses. That's not something that's been interesting to me, but I know there are people out there who have made this their main line of business. And I've worked for some of those people and I've helped them succeed, and that's been a lot of fun. If that's something that's interesting to you, that could be an avenue, but just keep it a side project as long as possible so you are not taking on that risk. And just understand that anything that you do for fun, that you take and make it your day job, you are almost guaranteed to just punch a hole in the side of your spaceship and suck the joy out of that into space, right? It's sort of the sad reality of life when you make something fun, your job, and now it's a little bit less fun. Still a little fun, but not quite as pure. I have seen people succeed with very popular open source libraries. So if you want to build a library that people can use, not an application, and it gets very popular, you can enable sponsors on your project, and people can contribute either a one-time thing or a monthly fee for it. I have done one-off things on GitHub where I have sponsored somebody. I have an active sponsorship on another platform. I'm not sure which one. For Avalonia UI, I really like that. I want it to exist, and that's why I support it. So there are people out there who will support things, or organizations that will support things that they use a lot, which is really good. But it's rare, right? And often you have to be really big and really popular and paying a lot of prices in your terms of your mental sanity and your stress and all these other things in order to start getting even a trickle of income. So again, I don't view this as a really good way of getting money, but you might get lucky in that regard. I have gotten success in writing. When I write articles, I tend to write a lot of articles, and it's sort of random almost in how well articles do. Most of my articles don't do very well at all and don't get noticed. But some of them do really well, especially over time, to the point where I'm getting, regular $25 a month or something like that from Medium, which is not a ton of money, but it's not no money. I can buy some Dr. Pepper with that every month, right? I can pay my web hosting costs every month, right? That helps offset that. But you know that the government likes money, and so I have taxes that I have to pay on that income as well. So just keep in mind there are ways you can get money from some of this stuff. I don't think it should be your primary motivator, and with writing in particular, it can be very, very, very spiky, where most of your stuff is not going to get noticed, and some of your stuff is just going to go viral and be very effective. My most effective piece of content actually came out of doing lunch with a guy. He paid for my lunch for this conversation, and he asked this question. I'm like, boy, that's a really good question. Other people have that question too. I should write some thoughts on it, put it in a blog post, send it back to the guy to say, hey, here's some more thoughts about it from our conversation. I really enjoyed your time, yada, 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 published it. And then I turned around and the thing had gone wild on Medium, and it's gotten me a decent chunk of money since then. Pound for pound, I'm probably able to get more money writing blog posts than books. Books don't pay very well at all, but books are also very fulfilling to write once you're done publishing them, I would say. Mark, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, you're not book. You don't write a book for the money.
No. Yours is, what was the title of that? I've forgotten your title.
Mastering Terraform.
Mastering Terraform. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have refactoring with C#, and data science with .NET and polyglot notebooks. Pronunciation, of course, is not quite accurate. So how do we start a side project? Well, first you pick an idea, a topic, and a technology, figure out how you want to combine the two of them, and then you start going. Typically, I will create a GitHub repository. You might do GitLab or something else. It's up to you as to whether or not you're going to make it public or private. If you don't want anyone to see, if you don't want anyone to judge you, private's fine. I have found that making things public is not a huge deal. People might find it and get some use from it. It's nice to be able to link people to it. I don't know how much people in the community judge me for the random things that I do and don't document, and like. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the dangers of public in a minute, but it's sort of up to you. I do recommend generally public. I've taught with people who recommend private side projects for students, but those are people at the very beginning of their career who might be judged much later on for their early skills. There are starter templates you can do for many things. So you might, if you're building a Razor app, you can go out there and see if you can find like a really interesting template that's more than just the weather counter and the like. But the starter things you get out of Visual Studio are usually pretty good. I will usually start by editing the README markdown file to have like the list of major tasks that I want to do in the project. And I'll use like the dash brackets, and I'll put a little X in there to mark that it's done afterwards. That's about the extent of the project management work I do on that early on. And I just do a little bit of feature work on each one. And then you just keep working on features until you're ready to stop. And that's sort of what I work on with that. Scope. Scope is the thing that will kill most of your side projects early on, at least it did for me. When I was a teenager and I'm like, I really love coding, I really hate everything else in life, but coding is so much fun, let's do that. Well, I would think of all these great side projects. I want to build a game, I want to build whatever it might be. And it was just too big for what I was able to accomplish, or what I had time to accomplish, or what I had energy to focus on and accomplish. So I would feel really bad about myself as a human because I didn't finish anything. It's like, okay, that's not how I should have felt. And I was trying to see if that was my next slide. It wasn't, but side projects exist to serve you, not the other way around, right? So give yourself permission to not finish something, but scope is going to be the number one killer of your early side projects. If you're not doing a ton of side projects and you start doing them, just keep it really small. Keep it really constrained. And if you need to grow that scope, that's cool. But otherwise, you're going to feel bad about yourself until you know that it's cool. They're serving me, not the other way around. I think one of the ways that I succeed a lot in my life is by finding a rhythm that works well for me. Every night, 9:30 to about midnight, I am programming on something fun, or I'm writing, or I'm doing something fun. I'm able to do that because I have no kids and a wife who's a morning person and I'm a night owl. That's something that works well for me personally. You're going to find something that works well for you, whether that's, Saturday mornings or, some piece of time that you find consistent for yourself. Find something that works well for you and for you personally, and then go with that, right? Just understand that life is different for every person, and you're going to need to change. Do things that are fun. This is one of the mini games I built. There's a little spaceship there. This was actually part of how I was dealing with loss after losing my dad. Was I'm like, well, I can't do a lot of the things that I want to do, but I think I can do some game dev. And so I went through a series of Coursera courses. I was talking to Stephanie earlier, who's going through some Coursera specializations, and they have a Michigan State University one on game development with Unity. And so I took on this challenge of like, hey, every month I'm going to build a small time-boxed game. I'm going to have whatever fun I can have with it, and I'm just going to build something fun. And programming can be really, really, really fun when you get to do whatever you want. And especially if you don't have pressure on yourself to ship something, to share something, to have something completely bug-free or polished or documented or whatever it might be, right? So embrace that fun and just find that joy in programming, especially if work is really stressful for you, especially if you're coming off of a stressful project or you're feeling disappointed in your career or whatever it might be. It can be really valuable to put some joy and confidence back in yourself. When I'm doing side projects, I try to keep things in basically very obvious prototyping stages, right? This is a game project I did. These are very obviously non-final graphics that you might ship a game with. The ones that are nice, I stole those from somebody else. I bought them, but I know my skills. I know the way that I was built. I am not an artist. I am not a composer. I am not even that great at audio. And so I'm going to use placeholder content for that stuff, and I'm going to focus on the things that I'm interested in, whether that's the AI or game design or whatever else it might be. This is a metaphor here with game design, but with programming, if you're working on a web app, well, you don't have to start by building authentication. Right? Starting your side project off by dealing with authentication is about as fun as root canal. You probably just hard code in, hey, you have a user, it's user one, that's you. I'm logged in as user one. Maybe if you're building an API, require a specific header to come in, like a specific GUID that you store somewhere else. But that's okay, right? Just start simple with some basic things, and don't put production level expectations on your side project, because that's a good way of making it unfun very quickly. Keep your goal in mind. This was a diagram I built of a system architecture while I was exploring event sourcing. Event modeling. Event sourcing is something different. I was building an interactive fiction game involving me walking my dog, oddly enough. But I was focusing on all these, the ways that these events would work together. And I don't even remember half of this at this point. It's been a number of years since then. But I built the system in question, and then I started building out the game that it was supposed to power. I'm like, this is not sparking joy. I don't love writing all this stuff right now. This is just too big of a scope. I did the things I was trying to do. Let's just focus on an interesting goal instead. So keep in mind why you were doing your side project in the first place, and then move on if you've strayed from that and it's no longer interesting. I mentioned my game dev one game a month project. I thought that worked really, really well for game development, because with game development in particular, you're never done until you say you're done, right? There's always something to tweak, something to add, something to remove, something to fix. This is a game I think I called Kinda Sus. I built it during the pandemic, during the height of Among Us. It's a little side scroller where you're a little alien guy killing crewmates and impersonating them so you can sneak up on other crewmates to kill them. Again, I might have some issues. I played this game the other night. It's a buggy mess. But people have actually gone in and sped run this. There was a competition on itch.io, however you pronounce the site, to see who could do this as quickly as possible. And they got a lot of value out of my buggy mess that I built during the pandemic. It's like, that's cool. But the reason why it's out there to begin with is because I had a firm stop date, and that stop date came from Coursera, in that when I had to submit my assignment by. It's like they wanted me to spend a couple days on it. I spent a month. Okay. But I submitted the assignment and I moved on to the next course. And I think giving yourself a time limit and then moving on to something else can be really helpful, especially if you tend to gold plate things or feel like nothing is ever good enough or whatever. It's like, it's okay. It's a buggy mess, but it's still hilarious. So when do you kill your babies? When do you kill your side project? When they no longer spark joy, right? There comes a point where, like, why did I do this? Why am I still doing this? Why am I not doing this other thing that sounds really interesting? And that's okay. That's normal. It took probably 20 side projects until I learned that. But it's okay to give up on something and start something else. So if it's no longer energizing you, if it's now draining from you, that's probably a good reason to start thinking about moving on to something else, or just stop doing what you're doing right now. If you started your side project to learn or investigate something and you feel comfortable with it, okay, maybe it's time for something else. And you might come back to it. I've come back to a number of side projects over the time, or you might not, but that's okay. It exists to serve you. Sometimes you're going to find things that are just beyond your skill level, right? Game development has always been interesting to me. That's how I got into computers to begin with. And I kind of suck at trigonometry. I sort of suck at reading math in general. I have a master's in data analytics, and yet math scares the crap out of me sometimes. That's okay. That's just part of how my brain ticks. It takes me a little bit longer to stare at something. I have given up on side projects before because I couldn't figure out the math involved. Now, ChatGPT has actually been very helpful for some of that. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about this. This is what I've got right now. I think I'm kind of close. What do you think? Is there some concept I might be missing? It can actually point me in right directions. It can also point me in really wrong directions too. So you're kind of playing Russian roulette a little bit when you're involving the AI. Performance. Sometimes you're going to try something that's just not performative at all, and it might be non-performative at a design level. So you started with a bad design. It's leading to all sorts of performance issues. You might decide, hey, I really care about this. Let's go back to the drawing board and revamp this. That's what I've done with Werewolf a number of times by this point. Or you might say, this doesn't spark joy. I'm going to move on to something else, right? There's going to be some times where it's like, okay, I thought this was going to be easy. I thought this technology would work. It's not ready for production yet. I thought I was ready for this project. I don't have the skills and knowledge yet, and I can't easily acquire them right now. Let's come back to this later on. Sometimes it's worth powering through those as a growing opportunity. Sometimes it's not. You're the person who knows yourself the best, usually. So use that wisdom that you have over yourself to know when it's time to fight a battle, when it's time to find a new hill to fight over, right? And often I'm just like, ooh, that's a really interesting idea. I really want to play with that idea. Let's move on, right? Again, side projects exist to serve you, not the other way around. So other things to be aware of. Most of these have happened to me. Some of these are things that have happened to my students, and I want to warn you of their headaches. So anybody ever play with Copilot or whatever, and it suggests a key for you when you're defining a configuration file? This is an example I came up with a couple days ago where it's suggesting an Azure OpenAI key. Thankfully, that's not a real key. That's clearly a sequence of numbers and not a real key, but I have had it suggesting real keys before. The reason why it does this is because it was trained on public code, and public code has included other people's secrets. So if you check in an Azure key or an OpenAI key or whatever, and you put it in Git, and you commit that, you push that, well, it's up there for somebody to see. If you say, oh crap, you delete it and you push the deletion up there, great, it's now harder to find. Is it possible to find it still? Yes. Do people automate scripts to find it still? Yes. So once you push a secret up there on a public Git repository, that's probably when it's about time to start looking at emergency scrubbing your commit history. You might be looking at maybe a force push. You might be looking at something else to try to expunge that from your history. But that can and will hurt you if someone finds that and uses that key for evil. Or you can go into Azure or wherever and just say, hey, regenerate this key, and now the key that you checked in is no longer valid. That's usually a saner approach, but just keep that in mind. People can find your stuff and use it. I've also found some of my old projects that I try to pull out for demos. I'm like, oh crap, I committed a secret 10 months ago. Nobody found it. Cool, let's regenerate it anyway. But yeah, that can hurt you. If you don't know how to solve this, real easy with .NET. You just right-click on your project, and you say Manage User Secrets. It's something very similarly named in Writer, and then you can open up a JSON file, secrets.json file that's stored in a different location on your machine. It's not in the same directory that gets source controlled, and you can define your own stuff there. And then when you're loading up your project, you're just saying, hey, I want to add user secrets for this type, and it will load that up automatically, right? So that way you are not committing your secrets to Git on accident. So really easy way of not shooting yourself in the foot. If you do shoot yourself in the foot, there are ways of recovering from it, but nobody likes a hole in the foot. Other things, some of these cloud services you play with, well, they can cost money. I had a student who was creating a database, and this was actually an Azure database, And he created this database, and he's like, okay, well, I don't need a big database, so I'm going to scale this cores down to 1. Cool, so 1 vCore. That should be cheap, right? Gets to the end of the month, and he's got a $200 bill for his database that he really wasn't using. He meant to use DTUs instead of vCores, or rather, he should have used DTUs instead of vCores. He was a newbie. He didn't know the difference. You're going to not know the difference on some of these things, especially when you get into new things and you're doing new things to learn, right? That's not on you necessarily, but it's something to be aware of. If you're doing any sort of cloud resources, you want to be watching really carefully your spend. And both AWS and Azure and Google, they all have ways of setting up alerts and monitoring and saying, hey, how much are we spending? And catching that early is better than not catching it, right? I would recommend, as you're finishing up your projects, delete your cloud resources. And also just come back a week later and just check the costs again to make sure that you don't have like a container registry or something hanging around and costing you money. It will happen. Other cautions. I really wish this one was animated because this is a 2D thing where it's a roguelike I was building in Angular back when I was a front-end Angular guy, and I was building a roguelike to do all sorts of emergence and AI behavior, so AI could learn how to play against you, and it was a lot of fun. So I had this really cool, snappy prototype built using JavaScript, Angular, TypeScript, all that good stuff, and it was going really well. And then I left my job, became a manager, and all of a sudden I was no longer kind of working on an Angular team with the .NET backend. Now I was a .NET API team lead. So I was leading a team of .NET developers. I'm like, okay, I need to really shore up my .NET API skills. I know I'll keep working on this project. I'm really interested in this project, but instead of all the processing logic being locally, I'll have it on a .NET server, and I'll have an API for it. It's like, okay, well, great. I just hamstring my application, because whenever I would make a move, so I'd press the right button to move over, it'd send a request to the server, it'd come back, and that was, we're talking like 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds at best, but that delay was enough to be noticeable in gameplay, and it actually made the game a lot less fun to play. And it also, I spent a month rewriting the thing in the .NET backend instead of a Angular frontend logic. So this decision effectively hamstringed my project. It did actually make me pretty good at .NET backends. It gave me the confidence I needed to lead my team, and it taught me a lot more about performance and APIs and things like that. But that decision did kill that project that I was interested in. I revisited it later on. I tried to make it a 3D project in Unity. What I discovered was scale is hard, right? If you try to do something big, well, you need a lot of hours for it. And so it took a lot more time to build something bigger. And when you had a lot more assets, well, those became new problems for source control. Game development in particular, a lot of images, a lot of things like that. Now you're dealing with large file storage, and you need to move from Git to Mercurial or other source control providers. And those factors kind of killed that project. I also had a lot of Unity bugs at the time, which was hard. The other factor for that is I was really mostly interested in this project from an AI perspective. Even back then, I wanted to play around with behavior trees and reinforcement learning and things like that. So what I was really interested in was just, how does the logic work for my AI? And instead I was trying to build a 3D engine and a game, and really focusing less on the thing that I was trying to focus on. So constraining your scope is important, because if you don't, it's going to own you, it's going to own your project, and it's going to kill a project. Still glad I did this, but I didn't have a prayer of succeeding, just how I had scoped it. Burnout, this is one I don't feel that qualified to talk about. I don't feel like I deal with burnout to the extent. Why are you laughing, Stephen? For me, a lot of this stuff is energizing, right? That's not always true, right? You know yourself better than anyone else, and what works for me, or what works for your coworker, or what works for your family member or brother, or whatever it might be, is not necessarily going to be true for you. So don't judge yourself by other people's behavior or experiences or whatever, you're going to have to learn the buttons that work well for you. And just understand that there's going to be times in your life when it's like, okay, I can't do this right now. That's okay, right? One aspect of side projects is, as a developer, as a good developer that who attends user groups, because most developers who attend user groups are pretty good developers, in my opinion. You know how you ought to build software. You know you got to use CI/CD. You know you want to do automated deployments. You want to do testing. You want to do documentation. You want to do all of these standard practices. So when you start doing your side projects, you think, boy, I feel evil. I haven't done any unit tests yet. So? Is that what you're trying to practice? Sometimes you want to do unit tests as you're going. Sometimes you want to practice test-driven development. I think we're calling it test-driven design nowadays. I still am an old dog and I call it test-driven development. Sometimes you don't. My werewolf project, I knew I was going to break that sucker a lot because it dealt with probability, and so I knew I had to have tests around certain areas. Most of my stuff, I don't have to do tests around. I feel very dirty about that, and I shower to try to address that. But I focus on the stuff that sparks joy and learning and growth. And I know that working in one way on my side projects and one way in the production projects, that's okay, right? It really depends on what your goals are. There have been entire projects I've done TDD just for the sake of doing TDD. There have been projects I've done with Terraform just so I can learn all the things that Mark knows. It's not happening, he's so smart. But that's okay, right? Don't expect that you're going to have the same degree of rigor with your side project, the stuff you do for fun, as you do with your job. If you're interviewing people, don't expect that they have the same level of rigor. Don't expect that just because Tiana is showing you a cool side project she worked on last weekend and she didn't write any unit tests, that doesn't mean that she's going to join your organization and never write a unit test. Okay? Just ask questions. So remember, your side projects serve you. You don't serve them. They help you grow and experience joy and fulfillment. They're not some alien god you serve. So, which of these developers, if you're bringing in, if you're looking at their resumes and their GitHubs, which of these developers would you bring in for a job interview? You should bring in the bottom right. Please hire me.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone here you wouldn't bring in? Bottom left. I think that looks very nice. That looks like a very nice kitchen backsplash right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the top 9 are me. So that's cool. So thank you for not rejecting me outright. I appreciate that. I really like the Pac-Man. That's pretty nice. And then the please hire me. If you're not aware, you can actually hack your GitHub history because you can amend commits and all these things. So you can write a utility that designs a pattern here. I would really bring in somebody who had figured out how to put please hire me on their banner. Like, I would want to talk to that person, right? Like, even though I know they've hacked that, like I don't want to have that conversation, right? Don't judge others on your team or others in your candidate pool based on whether they're doing side projects or not, based on the quality of their side projects even, right? Because keep in mind, people working on side projects, they don't have that much time to work on them many times, right? They might be trying to do something really interesting or different. Person could have tried let's code this left-handed challenge. You don't know, right? Someone could say, hey, I hate var. Let's build a whole side project using var only. I do hate var, by the way. But those are my religious preferences right there. The other thing, I feel like from mid-2000 to mid-2015, I was guilty of this, where I judged other developers on my team based on their extracurriculars. Are you reading programming books? Are you going to conferences? Are you attending user groups? Are you working on side projects? And if you're not, are you a real developer? Oh, I'm mad at past Matt because past Matt doesn't understand that people have lives and people have things that you don't see. People have sick family members, aging parents. People have families. People get pregnant, right? There are all sorts of things. And if we start saying everyone has to be like me and do the things that make me good at what I do, that's really dangerous in terms of A, diversity, but B, just being charitable with our coworkers and with ourselves to some extent or another, because you're not always going to be able to do these things yourself. So just word of caution there. This is kind of interesting. This is a year in my life. It looks, 2015. It's interesting looking back on your old history. You can see like the things that you were working on. Like this might be a side project. This is another side project, and then I think here I was starting a new side project, and then something happened, and things got a little slow, and then big old gap, and then an explosion, and then a gap, and then mini explosion, and then another kind of lull here. If you're judging a person based on this, well, A, you're seeing they commit a lot, but let's say it wasn't as dense as this. You don't know what's going on in their life. In my particular case, this is a time in my life that I needed to give myself permission to not do side projects anymore, because I was trying to do a commit a day on a side project from a hospital bed for a number of weeks. And at some point I was like, well, let's keep the streak alive. I'm like, well, I missed a day. And then it's like, okay, I really should have charitable expectations of myself here. I focused on getting better. I focused on learning to walk again in that period of time. And then I discovered, hey, I have energy. Hey, I have health. I have things again. And like, let's try programming a little bit. Okay. All right. Maybe not yet. A couple weeks later, hey, let's try it again. And you see this explosion. It's like, holy crap, I have this energy. And that's part of how I measured my own health and my own recovery. And like, okay, I have this energy. I think I have room to start going back to work a little bit more than I am right now, because I had to phase back into the workforce with the extent of what was going on with me at the time. But your GitHub history, if you're doing side projects, it will tell you a little bit more about what's going on in your life, and it's kind of interesting to look back on it. But if you're looking at somebody else, you don't know what's going on in their life, so don't judge others through that. Would be my advice. And I wish that I had learned that lesson earlier in my life, because I feel I have judged others. Not that I've been in that position too much, but I certainly have judged coworkers in prior decades. One last note I think I have for you, death by process. I worked in the project management software industry for 9 years because I enjoy tasks. I enjoy breaking things down into little cards that we can move off to the right. I actually started that job building waterfall software and ended that job building agile cardball software, which is kind of cool. Shows you how the industry changed during those times. I found that a lot of my projects I could pretty reliably kill by injecting more process into it. Like, hey, let's plan this out. Let's add in more steps. Let's add in CI/CD. Let's add in all these other things. And the more I focused on things that weren't actually coding, the more it just died. So I would suggest use just enough process for what you need, and then add things as it makes sense. I do like to set up CI/CD early on, but I don't spend a lot of time doing that, because for me, it's nice to be able to commit and always just take a look at the website running out there and just experiment with it and showing with it. So let's talk about how to kill things, because your side projects are going to die. So you should do it on your terms, right? As your side projects wind down, you might choose to go back in and update your documentation. Usually I'll start a side project with a little bit of documentation, and then I don't update the README file for a very long time. It can be helpful at the end to go back in and put in more documentation, especially if you think it's something worth sharing later on, especially if the setup was a little involved, right? That's optional. I have stuff out there that it's not really documented, and people will occasionally reach out to me saying, hey, Matt, this is really interesting. How do I get started with this? I imagine that for every person who does reach out to me, there's probably 5 or 10 that don't. So keep that in mind. But if you're trying to build something to help other people, think about documentation as like a last task on a side project. If you have a side project you particularly liked, it could be nice to share it with others. That can be hey, here's a Slack or Teams post about this project. Most organizations I've worked for, we like to have like a side projects or personal projects direct channel. We have one at Leading Edge. It's a lot of fun to see what other people are doing, especially when they're working with things I'm interested in. It's like, ooh, you're working with AI and you're doing things libraries that I don't use. That's cool. How's that working for you? How's that compare to what I use? Well, that's cool. now I have more ideas for my next project. And what I found is that when you have people sharing, and it doesn't feel like people are showing off, that's a nice little caveat there, right? If you have a lot of people sharing, you can have a really interesting culture of, hey, let's learn and innovate and grow. And hey, that's a really cool thing you did in the side project. Can we maybe do this in our next work project or next sprint or something like that? This little aspect of it. If there's a particularly interesting aspect of your code, you might want to write up a little dev to or Medium or other form of blog post. If you don't like to write, just record yourself talking about it real quick and put in some visuals of your code or whatever. YouTube shorts are great. YouTube videos are fine. I usually tend to spend more time than I should editing mine, and so I don't record as many YouTube videos as I probably ought to. If you really like a project, really think it's interesting, you want to mature it a little bit more, you can submit it as a conference talk or a lightning talk to a group like this one. And another plug for Stir Trek, whose call for speakers ends next Tuesday. If you have a really interesting side project, that's really cool. You can submit it. This is also, by the way, a really good way of forcing yourself to finish your side project by submitting it as a conference talk or a book chapter proposal, as I did with Werewolf, or whatever it might be. Just make sure that you can get it actually completed by that time. Otherwise, it's going to be more of a stressor than anything else. But having a deadline can be really helpful and harmful at the same time. So just keep those things in mind. These things I've been talking about are optional. I do think that as you finish a side project, or as you found, hey, I'm no longer working on this, I guess I'm done, it's good to just say, hey, what did I do? What was fun? What was not fun? What did I learn? What did I wish I knew? What do I wish I could apply to work? What would I do next time? And this is the kind of thing that you can run as you're showering or driving to work or walking the dog or whatever. You don't need to sit down and have a formal retrospective of your project. Though if that is the kind of thing that makes you dance, then sure, go for it. But for me, this is more of a, hey, I'm driving to work, I'm thinking about something, and that helps me. So final thought, if you don't take anything else out of this, your side projects exist to serve you, not the other way around. I wish teenage Matt would have known that. That would have saved him some mental turmoil. But side projects are awesome, and I hope you do something fun with them. So thank you. I'm curious, anybody here actively working on side projects right now? Laura, what are you working on? You don't mind sharing?
Yeah, it's pretty nerdy. So.
Oh no, not a nerdy side project.
I know, right? Who would think? I played a lot of Neopets as a kid, and I started to get back into it a little bit. And there are a lot of little daily tasks that you can use every day.
Okay.
So I've used Selenium to automate opening up the browser and going to each of these task links and completing things daily.
Yeah. So web testing with Selenium on a side project or as a side project, that's a pretty good way of getting better at Selenium.
Yeah, and I hadn't used Selenium before, but I was interested in it, so it worked.
Cool. What else?
Right, I got it's a Angular. It's a portfolio website, and I've actually written backend code in .NET and repository pattern for a database to generate the form, the add, the edit, and the list with the table in Angular. And you download it into your front-end project, and then you download the repository and the controller in the backend, and then you hit play, and then you have a CRUD on any model.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just for fun. So that's the problem I got into. What I do is you set up your data grid columns in a CRUD, and you set up your edit rows in a CRUD, and then you set up your detail rows in a CRUD, and then it just generates it depending on the model with the controls that you need.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's sweet. Before I was trying to run rendering of it in the model, and then I got into a problem with the any type, where then you have to be indexed with it and trying to bind those controls. And I was like, well, I'm rendering HTML anyway. Why don't I just generate it? And then, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it's funny. I would tell my students being lazy is a virtue for a developer. And most of them, it took them a while to understand it. I had one student get really mad at me every time I said I was lazy. She's like, "You're not lazy. You obviously work very hard." It's like, "No, I work very hard at being lazy. You don't understand."
Spend 10 hours automating a task, I don't have to spend 5 minutes on it.
Oh, that sounds like a programmer right there. Yeah, definitely spend 10 days automating something that you have to spend 5 minutes every few years on.
So no, I use repository patterns within the framework. So I inherit it, and I have a type parameter, and then I use dependency injection on the base constructor to send down generic functions into it, and I copy the files, and then I find and replace, and then I use it.
Yeah.
I've worked so hard to make it all work in generics, hours and hours and hours, so I don't have to write any functions at all in my repository. The class is in.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Anyone else? Yeah, sir.
I've been working on an inventory management system for my brother using Uno because he wants it on his phone.
Okay, so .NET Uno is awesome for those who are not aware. I got to talk to some of the developers last week. It's cool.
I restarted it like 4 times because I keep changing my mind on like the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm sure you're learning something every time, right? And
yeah.
The way you structure applications, the architectures you choose, like that's great stuff for side projects, because if you are building a new project at work and you've chosen an architecture, you might be stuck with that because you don't have time necessarily to restart a new project at work. My side project that I've started this week, if my nerves work for me, is book number 3, which is about side projects with C#. So I'm getting very meta at this point in doing a book on side projects and side project development and the like. And so chapter 1 due next week is choose your own adventures using Spectre Console and the like. And we're getting all the way up to monogame and .NET Aspire and all these fun things. I'm going to do either Avalonia UI or Uno. I was planning on doing Avalonia UI for a chapter, and then I talked to the Uno guys. I'm like, ooh, this is really handy for devs. And so, yeah. But that's what side projects should be about. It's about finding joy in the things that you're doing. So that's all I've got for us tonight. We'll be back next month. Feel free to hang around till our central insurance folks kick us out. But it would be great to talk about side projects and all that cool stuff. And don't forget to submit to Stir Trek if you're interested. If you want to sponsor Stir Trek, we still have openings for sponsors as well. We would love to have your support and support of your organizations. And keep building nerdy stuff. And thanks for coming tonight.